People can wait.
C Talk, what's up? What's up? Stuff to make you see squad. We back at it. Here we are again. I know this is this is gonna be an interesting one. Let's start tagging people and whatnot. I mean, this is what we do. We here to build community. I mean, we got two educators. We got an attorney in the room. You know what I mean? And we got a community member in the room. Like, what could be better? So just go ahead and gather in the room. Let's tag some people to, let's just talk about these shootings, not just school shootings. Let's talk about the school shooting. Let's talk about the Buffalo shooting too. And this is a tough one because there's not no easy answers when it comes to this. I don't think there is. I'm not going to be, and when I use the term disingenuous, I'm not trying to disrespect anybody out there or on this panel, but I'm saying I'm not being disingenuous thinking that this is something easy to solve because I'm in the trenches every day. And the Buffalo shooting, the shooting that happened a few days ago at the elementary school, it really articulated the point that you risk your life every day as an educator, especially as an administrator, because I'm literally in these streets this year. I ain't gonna lie, man. It was rough, man. Coming back from a pandemic, we can talk about that too. That's a dynamic. I'm literally breaking up fights, risking my life in the middle of the street. People pulling out mace. So it's tough. So I just want to start it off with the basis. The basic premise is: are schools safer with trained and armed law enforcement or security? And I just want to open it up like that. I mean, let me go back. No, I want to open it up. What are your first thoughts about all this?
So I'll start off with the qualifiers, because if we don't say this, someone's going to get on here and be mad. So the first thing is that any solution that involves any law enforcement or person with a firearm in schools will lead to a disproportionate amount of Black and brown children being harmed by those people who are armed in the schools. That is an outcome a lot of people will not find acceptable for reasons that are very, very easily understood.
Can you say that one more time? Say that one more time.
Any solution that involves arming people at schools, whether it is law enforcement, staff, other students, or teachers, it really doesn't matter who it is, will disproportionately result in accidental / tragic or intentional but tragic deaths of Black and brown students. So the conversation that we have tonight starts with understanding that. We know that. We're not saying that there's any solution that we can come up with that will involve arming people in the school that will not involve at some point a Black or brown student being harmed, possibly with great bodily harm and death, in the school by somebody who would have a firearm. Why? Because racism, because of all the things we always talk about with respect to education and discipline in schools. And of course, the next logical step is that if you arm the people who discipline disproportionately, then they would also use excessive force disproportionately. All that we know. So if you're watching, don't feel like you have to say that. Don't feel like you have to remind us. We know that.
But I would push back on that and say that's a different category than a mass shooter. Accidental shootings is different than the topic that we're talking about, a mass shooting.
So I'll push back on your response by saying that I'm jumping past the initial question, saying that if our solution involves this, if our response to the mass shooting is to arm people in schools, then we know what will happen as a result of that on some level, statistically speaking. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I got something for that too. What was your initial thoughts, Doc?
I was wondering, are you talking about arming them with guns or with rubber bullets or with mace? So
Question.
what would you, because I mean, in theory, I would think, and still with the understanding that I know that Black and Brown children and educators would be disproportionately impacted. Um, I would probably advocate more for the rubber bullets, the mace, something to stop um, people from, committing these sorts of crimes. The actual bullets, then that's where I would probably push back on. But some sort of deterrent, I think, is necessary.
Oh, that was a surprise. I didn't even think you would say that.
Oh
Okay.
well, and I have to speak on this gingerly because I mean this is something I normally don't share. But when I taught in Europe, I had a colleague that was killed, but they were stabbed to death by a student in gymnasium who was unhappy with their grades and stabbed them to death in the area where we would have lunch. So I have to think about that in terms of, there are different weapons. So these things still happen. And there was never a discussion after that, oh, well, we need security guards. It was okay but then again, that's a knife and that's impacted one person versus, something like an assault weapon. But I would probably advocate for other deterrents.
So yeah, because okay, that's interesting that you said that. And the reason why it surprises me that you said that, because I would think whether it was mace, whether it was rubber bullets, whether it was a billy club, if those people are not trained and they don't have social justice principles at their focal point, then they will use those items to oppress the people
Yes.
too. No matter what the weapon is, even if the weapon is just purely power and authority and influence,
Mm-hmm.
that's a weapon. Like, people see me as an administrator. You know this, Doc. You worked in the schools. You know, they see us as a weapon because we have the authority to suspend you and exercise um exclusionary discipline at our discretion.
Mm-hmm.
So
Right.
at the protest that I, was, attended today, and I stood in the middle of the crowd. Give it to me. I stood on behalf of the admin team, and I feel like it's natural to be defensive in some situations because you want to defend your practice. But I'm just, I didn't say anything other than, students run this school to a certain degree, on a
Right.
certain level. You know what I'm saying? And out of this protest, I trust that there come at least one movement, one organization, one club that is anti-bullying.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? But I stood there and I listened to what they had to say, but I heard a lot of, administrators don't care, teachers don't care, people in the building don't care. They're just here to get a paycheck. They don't do anything. So
Right.
even your power and your influence, becomes a weapon. And I don't think a lot of people really understand when they be like, law enforcement shouldn't be in the school, this, that, and the third, no SROs. I don't think they understand we are, post pandemic, we are armed with, well, I should say, post George Floyd
Mm-hmm.
protest, we are armed with a walkie talkie, contact information, and paperwork. That's it. Children, young adults threaten us, and we have a walkie talkie, we have a contact list, and we have paperwork. Now, on that contact list, maybe some people, some numbers that boo, 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 boo. The number you contacted is no longer,
Mm-hmm.
or they're not accepting, voicemails. Come on, man, we've been through this. Let's be real. Or you get a parent and they're saying, Well, my child did that to the other child because they were bullied. My child did that to you because of this, that. It's all kinds of excuses for violent behavior.
Right.
I've had more than one child, young adult, under the age of 18 tell me I've only been taught to handle situations with violence.
Mm-hmm.
I have a walkie-talkie, I have a contact list, and I have paperwork. That's it. And so I'm going to use that at my discretion. And sometimes I'm going to be like, man, look, I'm speaking to you kindly, respectfully, and calmly. If you're not going to listen to me, I'm going to let this paperwork go. Because that's my only weapon. But I've also been in the schools when we've had law enforcement to be like, there's a thing called a restraining order, anti-harassment order, no contact order. And I've known many families and students to utilize those resources. And you know who enforces them? Law enforcement.
Right.
I can't enforce that. We have an on-site no contact order but nothing sticks like the petitioner and the defendant and all that nice little jargon. Nothing communicates like that. Like, wow, this is in black and white. With that nice little, staple that can go through a whole bunch of pieces of paper on the left-hand corner. Like it hits different in this one piece of paper that says no contact for Lincoln High School. Well, what were your first thoughts, Precious, when you heard the news of Buffalo and especially the school shooting?
It's going to sound very, very morbid. To be perfectly honest with you, I wasn't shocked. And the reason why I have to say I wasn't shocked, because I have been seeing a very large growing of numbers of young kids and young adults getting a hold of guns. And I've been asking this probably for the last 5-6 months. Where the hell are they getting their hands on these weapons to even do something like this? And I'm just not talking about with school. I'm talking about even in public places like the grocery store or the church. Or even the subway in New York. I think a lot of people forgot about that already. I haven't forgot about it. Just like how, but I don't think he was a child. But nonetheless, it kind of makes me wonder how on earth how these children are getting a hold of these guns. Like, why is that the first step of getting a firearm? Because I'm hearing the dude that shot the school in I'm not sure how to pronounce that town. I know where that town is. It's not far from where I live. I don't know how to pronounce it though, but I never been through there. But anyways, he bought 2 guns apparently after he turned the age of 18. Is that not alarming? It kind of makes me wonder where he got the money from to even purchase those guns. I don't think those guns are that cheap. At least I don't think.
He had a job. He worked at Wendy's, as I understand, and he quit his
job. At Wendy's.
Yeah, so he had a job.
So with that being said, does more law enforcement at the school or security at the school or any place will help? It sounds good on paper, but I've always wondered what happens if they fail. What happens if they can't subdue or eliminate the threat in a timely manner that they don't get to the public? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's all good. I just think first we need to get the details right, because I'm hearing now from another one of my colleagues that he didn't have body armor.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Here's the deal. We need to look at the profile and the testimony of school shooters. So the reality of it is they're hitting soft targets. I don't know why people are just ignoring that fact. It's beyond me. So a lot of people's stats are like, schools are, not safer with armed people. They are law enforcement, but those are soft targets. Can you name the list of hard targets that have been hit?
None. Every victim, and that's another thing that me and some other people talk about. We noticed with many of the mass shootings, they always aim at the vulnerable. They don't go towards those who can actually defend themselves. They go towards those who normally cannot defend themselves. Not saying that anyone is invisible to a bullet. I'm not indicating that, but those type of shooters or assailants go after those they know full well they're not going to be equipped. They more likely don't have the physical strength to fight them all. So that's why with the grocery store, those elderly people could have done nothing against it. Although there was a 32-year-old woman, but even she could have done anything against that man doing the shooting. Just like these children, this teacher, there was no way they could have defend themselves against that. What was his motive? I don't know. I don't hear nobody saying what the motive was.
I know what the motive was
for the school shooting. I'm not talking about. I already know about the Buffalo other, but what did you think about this one?
I mean, it's the basic profile. I don't mean to be like reductive or anything or conflate things. It's to hit a soft target, kill as many people as possible.
Absolutely.
In as little amount of time as possible, even if it is going to resolve with me killing myself. My whole point is to kill people as fast as possible. Mm-hmm. And school shooters have also testified, and they have gained from a profile, because when you take the school shooting training, you know, as an administrator, and you study these things, they'll pull a fire alarm. Why are they pulling a fire alarm? Because their whole purpose is to kill as many people as possible in as little time as possible. And they do passing periods. They do cafeterias because that's their focal point. Their focal point is to kill a lot of people. And so my thing is that when you want to kill a lot of people, you want to hit a soft target. And I'm just like, I'm asking people, like, name the hard targets that have been hit. I mean, with all the, you know, the uprising and the protests that we've had over police brutality and injustice, I would like to know a list of police precincts, which would be a hard target that have been hit. And there's a reason why they haven't been hit. Now, the police precinct in the East Precinct in Seattle got hit, and that's what set up CHOP. So I'll give you that. It got hit. Yeah. The chief of police said, she gave the direct order, Carmen, said, let's get out of there. And so they abandoned it. I mean, they stood ground a little bit, but they understood what the optics and the imagery was of a police precinct standing ground against a whole bunch of people with like Molotov cocktails or just protesting and whatnot. It just wasn't a good optic. It just wasn't a good political move. So the chief of police caught a lot of heat, not only from people in the community, but of course from her colleagues. She decided to retreat, and they took over the precinct. So I'll give you that. East Precinct, Broadway, Seattle. Yes, during the George Floyd protests, yes, that was a hard target. It got taken over. But are you willing to call those protesters bullies? Are you willing to call them mass shooters? That's a whole different criteria, though. We're talking about mass shooters. Those were protesters protesting police brutality. We can't say their objective was the same of a mass shooter to go in there and kill as many people as possible. So it really still doesn't fit the criteria of a hard target where the mass shooter's objective was to kill as many people as fast as possible. I'm waiting for examples of hard targets that get hit. And if we don't have as many hard targets that get hit as much as soft targets like supermarkets and malls and universities and elementary schools and schools in general, it begs to ask the question of maybe soft targets are vulnerable for a reason. What am I missing here? You're muted, Bobby, you're muted.
I think the conversation that I see a lot online is people saying that if you can't predict the exact reason that the defendant does what they do, then you can't address it without addressing mental health. But I tend to lean in your direction, where if you can show me a scenario where someone knew that if they, regardless of what room of the school they entered, they would also meet gunfire, that's never happened. Now that doesn't mean that the next logical step is to say, so you're saying that every single teacher has a gun, which sounds kind of terrifying, right? But at the same time, the point that's being made is that when someone enters a space and they know that there's one or two people, and they've been in this space before, and they know where the two people who are armed are, even if they're security guards, because one of the data sets that I saw said that the presence of an armed security guard had doubled the amount of deaths, because it increases the aggression in the person who shows up, because he anticipates a response, but he's still only anticipating a response from one or two people. And so the odds are still stacked in the favor of the person who's showing up, surprising everybody. I mean, imagine if you know there's a security guard who's in the principal's office on one side of the school, but you enter the school from the backside, or right, just any exit or entry that does not pass by that office. If your goal is to get as many rounds off as possible, like you said, you're going to shoot a lot of people, since it can only, all it takes is this to get a round off before you're met by any challenge. So I do tend to think that targets, that the risk to the person who's committing the crime matters, because if they think that they could be killed before they carry out their mission, well, then they're not going to get whatever it is that they're looking for. And so I do think that effectiveness matters to them. Even if we know nothing else, effectiveness does matter to them, and that's been proven over and over.
Yeah, I see that. Another question I got for the panel is, when there's a school shooting, are you going to call the police?
Mm-hmm.
Then why won't you cut down travel time and already have the police there?
I mean, Dr. Diamond is probably the best person to respond to, because this is getting to
you.
Go ahead.
In a perfect world, schools would be located closer to police precincts so that they could be there rather quickly. That would be a perfect world, but that would, of course, so we probably need more community policing, because if they're already in the community, they'd be near the school. So it would be great to call them quickly. But it's probably, I mean, you're going to call the police, so it would probably be helpful to have someone that's armed to protect, that's trained and armed, versus everyone pulling out their own concealed carry and shooting and expecting teachers. Because I know at one point Texas was talking about having the teachers armed. Like, really? So it would be best to have people that are trained in how to use the firearms and can arrest. So it would be great, I'd say, in a perfect world, to have schools located closer to police precincts.
Yeah. Let me tell you something. It might sound contradictory. I don't trust a lot of these teachers teaching kids. I don't trust them with guns.
That's why I tiptoed around.
I was kind of sitting and looking at you. I'm like, okay, these little ideas don't sound bright, but I'm just sitting back listening. But yes, I don't.
Now let me and see. This is a person who works in the schools, been working in the school for 24 years. I used to be security. I used to be a teacher, and now I'm administration. So here's the deal. I don't want a person with a gun, even if they're trained, to be multitasking like that. I don't want your job to be, oh, I do lesson plans, I teach a class, I coach a sport, I do parent-teacher conferences, and then, by the way, if a shooter comes in here, then I'm letting off some rounds too. Nah, man, I need to minimize your duty. Your only job is to, number one, mitigate or facilitate law enforcement, or you know, to be armed to take down a shooter. That's it. I want you to do those two things. That's it. That's it. Let us take care of the rest. I don't need you to be like multifaceted like that. I don't. I would like to see schools with a lot more money that can reinforce a classroom, though. I would respect that. Using technology that, you know, every single door is bulletproof, you know, or the windows are bulletproof, or there's a way that we can, because I do lockdown drills. I'm over safety and security, so I do all the drills, like just better cameras and better ways to reinforce the building, you know, even if it means redesigning the whole building, putting the money there, you know, to help people feel safer, you know. And I think it's also putting more, you know, counseling and therapeutic services in the schools too. And just building that culture of like, we're going to give each school 50 grand so they can do conflict mediation training. And they can teach the kids how to do peer mediation. Like, there should be a budget for all the things that lead to prevention just as much that lead to intervention. And that's just not happening. But I think another thing is that we need to think about is when we look at this, and I think this is what Bobby was kind of getting to online. You can correct me. I just don't want us to be disingenuous. Like, our country is what it is, even though we might disagree with law enforcement, we might disagree with the military, the alphabet crew, FBI, DEA, Homeland Security. But are we really distrustful of those agencies to say our country and our safety would not be dramatically different and compromised if we did not have those agencies? Do we have that much distrust that when we say all the agencies that go into us taking a freaking vacation, which is all about privilege, which a lot of people in some countries, in some places in the world don't have, are we to say that all the agencies that go into us exercising that privilege have nothing to do with our safety? TSA, Homeland Security, all the stuff they do, like we don't need none of that? But since it's not happening, it's hard to prove that it would happen because it's data that doesn't even exist. And I know that plays both ways. You guys understand what I'm saying? Like, how do we measure a deterrent? How do we do that?
It's true.
But I guarantee if you go to SeaTac Airport tomorrow and there's no TSA and there's no Homeland Security overseeing your flight, I wonder if you get on that plane.
Hell no.
So you must trust in it. You would get on the plane, Doc?
I'd go to Boeing Field to get on a private plane.
Oh, then you
then I'd trust.
Yeah.
But we've created this situation. So, I mean, these are the discussions we have versus, hey, why don't we not have assault weapons? Hey, why don't we think about the Second Amendment and that it was created back when, you know, what the conditions that amendment was created were different, or the interpretation? Because from what I understand, our rather conservative Supreme Court has plans on expanding the Second Amendment. So, yeah, but because we can't have that conversation, we need to have the protection conversation.
But Doc, though, I got to push back. If you can get on a private plane, that's a lot of privilege. I can't even get on a private.
You might be able a fractional jet.
Nah, boss. Look, and I'm gonna keep it. I'm gonna keep it a kilo with you. Mm-hmm. I'm really, really disappointed, and you know, maybe I shouldn't because I have a lot of privilege. I make good money. I'm really disappointed that I'm probably not going to go too many places this summer because the plane tickets are so high.
Right now, because of the oil prices, yes.
Yeah.
That is
I don't think somebody would look at you feel ashamed. I think that's happened to everybody. I'm staying off a plane. I would just drive at this damn point.
Exactly. But you still got to pay the gas prices. That
Yeah.
might be $6 by the time we get to summer. You feel me?
That is true.
But I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to sit up here and cap and be disingenuous. I'm not getting on a plane if there's not oversight by those agencies. For real, though.
Mhm.
And I get stopped a lot. My name is Logic 7 Allah Amen. Well, I used to get stopped a lot, but now I don't really, because the Chinese president came to our school. So the Secret Service already ran my name. They already know I ain't doing nothing. So, but I was like, man, run my name. Make sure I ain't got no box cutters on me or nothing.
Mhm.
I don't know. I haven't heard a lot from Precious. I'd like to hear from her, but I will just say this. I think that one thing that a lot of people in the Black community have anxiety about with regard to this, not just the whole thing about, law enforcement being disproportionately violent with Black folks, is this idea of putting officers in schools where students don't have trauma. It's fine. The responses to law enforcement are natural. Those people feel comfortable around police. And like Killer Mike talks about this, places with selective diversity, like O'Day, where they're like, we'll take the good ones. We could have the police there, and yeah, there'd be a couple guys who are uncomfortable, but the police officers would treat them like they're O'Day kids, and so they would be fine. But it's the schools where the students are coming from homes where they're hungry when they show up, and they don't have all of the different support systems, and they have responses to teachers where teachers are scared, right? And a lot of people in our community feel that, and this is something I disagree with a lot of members of our community on, possibly because of my privilege, that those instances are just to be allowed in schools. So if your kid has an issue with self-control and he threatens a teacher, it's like, well, that's not a law enforcement issue. That's a part of school. I disagree with that. I would, if I'm a teacher, I'm not going for that. No, you should have that skill already. That's not my problem. But that's not how everybody in our community feels, right? So the concern is that the teacher doesn't accept that, brings in law enforcement, and now your kid has assault deadly weapon because they brought scissors up to the teacher when they were like, that's not a criminal issue. And I disagree with them on that, but whatever, people feel that way. And they don't want to see all of the outcomes that come from that. And they all really don't want to see the officer come in the room and say, put the scissors down. And the person goes, my mom, whatever, bang, kid's dead. That's how that goes. It's not hard for people to imagine that. It's not hard. It's not hard. That's what people are talking about when they say they're not sure how they feel about police in schools. And so just like, the point that Danica was making online, they're saying, well, this, and we can call it what it is, in my opinion, this doesn't happen in Black schools. So why should we have this disproportionate risk for our kids in our schools when these shootings are happening not in our community at all?
But they are happening in our schools. I mean, maybe they aren't taking out as many at once, but there are shootings constant.
But that's the argument that's being made, though. You're seeing it, Logic.
No, that's a terrible argument.
Yeah.
But that's what's being said. If you're going to make an argument that there's more risk about being killed in your community than by a shooter showing up at your school, then you're saying that that's not a concern that you have in your school. That's what you're saying. Is that not? Is there another way to interpret that?
I think some people should go to.
They're saying the risk is higher of being shot in the classroom by a law enforcement officer that works at the school than the school being shot up. That's the argument. It's probabilities.
The risk is higher to be shot by one of your community members.
But they're also saying the risk is higher of being shot by law enforcement that works in the school.
Okay, you're right. I want to get you're right by saying we need to get to Precious, and I want to say this before we get to Precious. I think that people need to take their privilege and they need to get on a plane and they need to go to those top 10 cities that are most violent and shadow people in a school for at least a day and see what they deal with.
I say that all the time.
Just see what they deal with. Because I've worked in all different areas. I've done street outreach where all I have is my comrades dealing with people, who have guns, and we're at torchlight, breaking up fights. All we have is us, and we're trained by people from South Central LA. I've been there. Some places in the world don't have. Or we just say that all the agencies that go in and we're trained. But anyways, so and I've been security in the schools. I've been administrator, and I've been in Bobby's situation in private schools. There's no such thing as police officers or security in private schools.
No.
So I know it works, but it's not that simple. Because those private schools that we went to, O'Day, had a culture. You know who was security?
The dean?
The priest.
The dean will come beat your ass.
Yes.
The dean will come beat your ass. That's Dean.
Wait, let's be clear.
So the priest that came around the cross is put a pistol inside.
Hold on, because I was gonna go deep, but I decided not to go there. But I'm just gonna scratch the surface. You know who was security at a private school? Religion. Catholicism. It was. It wasn't for most kids.
I'm just saying that we were worried. You knew, like, Keandre McGee is the dean of O'Day right now. Those students are scared of him, I promise.
Yeah.
When I was at Seattle Prep, they were afraid. I taught at Seattle Prep, but it was essentially the football coach because everyone was like scared of him because he only had to look in someone's direction and they were and the other kids told the other kids you're supposed to be scared of him. He was security.
What you thinking, Precious?
Well, I said a whole lot of my personal posts. I may have to save it for the after Steve talk because I said a whole lot of stuff, but I remember what Trisha was just saying, and I had brought this up. I said, you know what? We could go as deep as that, but at the end of the day, it's going to be down to access to those guns. It's really what's going to eventually going to have to come to eventually. Like, I know you're shaking your head because I was just sitting here. Are you shaking your head? But I was just sitting here thinking. And I said, y'all remember that incident that happened in New Zealand? It happened before the pandemic. When that sailor went into that mosque church and killed 51 Muslim worshippers. I'm not sure if anyone remember that incident. It happened in New Zealand. 2019, I believe. 2018, 2019 it happened. It was before the pandemic. And I believe that person used a high-powered gun. I'm not sure exactly what the gun was. But anywho, the point I'm making is that government had not only stricken their gun laws, they actually banned certain guns out that country and passed that damn law by the end of the week. You ain't heard no rebuttals. You ain't heard no outrages. No one had an issue with those guns, with those laws being passed, because they all was in agreement as a collective that what happened, that shit there can't happen again. This country is not going to do that. I say this country got ADD. They can't do two things at the same time. It's whether they're going to focus on their liberty of owning a weapon and certain weapons they get access to, and it's going to be protecting people, especially those who are vulnerable. And from over the years, it seems like the Second Amendment and their liberty to having a gun is going to win every single time. So the point I'm trying to say is, until they really want to make a change, this just going to be another cycle that's just going to go in the same circle to the next mass shooting. But go ahead, Logical. You got some off your chest. Go on here.
I'm going to add after too.
I just want to push back a little bit because I've been in, And I like to throw that out there that I've been an educator for 24 years. I'm proud of that. So I'm gonna push back a little bit on this. So what about bombs? So what kills more people in a short amount of time, guns or bombs? Are we gonna do the weapons Olympics now? Because a bomb isn't legal at all.
Mhm.
But a cat will show up at the Boston Marathon, boom.
Yeah, those include. They just don't stop at just guns.
Wait,
Go ahead.
let me drop another one on you that we need to look forward to post-pandemic. Biological warfare.
Mhm.
What makes you think that someone's not going to just, okay, take the guns away? I'm about to come up into a school and just put some virus up in there. Jim Jones to play. Jim Jones killed a whole bunch of people, didn't use one gun.
Don't drink the Kool-Aid.
I'm just saying. I agree with you that I think it will take some neighborhoods and some communities to adjust because it won't be as easy if you take away the guns. But I'm with Trish. If they have to do it by knife, they're going to do it. If they have to do it by bomb, they're going to do it.
Don't we love those odds though? If you have to do a mass killing by knife, I would
stop you.
Not by bomb, no, not by bomb.
No, obviously.
Right.
But I'm just
Not by
saying,
bomb.
if we force that action where people have to do it by knives, then
No, I don't think the logical progression for people who want to kill mass people, I don't think the logical progression is knives. I think the logical progression is bombs.
Sure.
Yeah.
Or poisoning food source, or gas. I don't want to give anyone any ideas, but I just thought of like
they already
10
got some
different
ideas.
engineering ways in my brain that you could do something like that. I think the problem is that America has a power issue because when you look at the 18-year-old who did the shooting in Uvalde, there were so many clear signs that, I mean, this was an 18-year-old who wasn't going to graduate, and having been an educator and as an administrator, when you're working with a loner who knows he's not going to graduate and not speaking to anyone, dressing in all black, argument with his mother to the point he had to live with his grandparents. There were so many steps that he was probably being disempowered. And then, in America, what's more empowering than a gun and the ability to, unfortunately, kill educators and children at the school that his grandmother worked at. So, there's so many things that went, or I guess so many signs or things that as educators you deal with every day. I mean, there have been kids when I taught that I knew I had to fail because they didn't turn anything in and they're seniors and they're threatening me, but that's just part of being an educator. And when you have an 18-year-old who's furious that I'm going to have to do another year over because of you, and you're like, but you haven't turned in any work and you've never shown up for any tests. So that's why you have that grade, and they don't want to hear that. And then, but then on the other hand, if you have someone who's completely disengaged, then that's also a cue that maybe you need to sound the alarm. But I don't think people realize how many kids that we probably could sound the alarm on all day, because there are so many kids, unfortunately, that are just like him.
So let me ask you the question, Doc, because you said that. I put that up there for a reason. Is it okay to profile a school shooter? Like, are we supposed to go through our books and be like, this is the profile for a school shooter?
Unfortunately, I think, the FBI, and they should study more of the profile. And as educators, we should probably be more respected when we say that there's an issue or are concerned. I know, as administrators, we always have like a school safety plan, or the plan that you make, for everyone's safety, because of course we have to be concerned about the children's safety, but we're also trying to make sure our teachers are able to go home to their families as well. So I think within our community, we should share our concerns. I'll say that. And maybe if we had more mental health care professionals at our schools, we could have those concerns worked out. But yeah.
Would you say that many of the mass shooters got mental illness, or is it something else?
Good question.
Because me, frankly, I don't think that's it. But that's just me being me.
The ones this week, maybe. The ones this week, they don't have finished brains. I hate always bringing everything back to brain development, but 18 to 25, your brain's incomplete. And I think I don't know if you could necessarily say it's mental illness, or it's more like feeling disempowered and needing something to prove that they are empowered men. Taking out, I don't know.
I got another story.
I'm with you, Doc. I'm also with Precious on this. I would like to hear Bobby's. I don't know if that's mental illness or mental wellness or mental health is a spectrum. You feel me? I don't know if we should keep calling this mental illness.
That's the buzzword that we love. I want to hear Precious's anecdote, because I have an anecdote from personal experience when I was in high school. So I used to sit by a guy in class. His initials were C and V. Nobody knows who this person is now, but he used to tell me and the person sitting next to me that if he ever decided to kill anyone, he would start with the person sitting next to me. And to your point about incomplete brains, we thought he couldn't possibly carry this out. Never even crossed my mind to mention it at the time. But he was, this was a young white male who was extremely overweight, and he had lost the weight. There was an article in the newspaper about him, he had lost so much weight as a young man, like a 12-year-old, and then he put all the way back on. So he's morbidly obese. He was 14. He was the type of kid that knew how to text on his calculator, knew how to program his own calculator, to the point where he would bring 3 or 4 scientific calculators to school so he could play games with himself. And at O'Day, if they'd catch you, they would take his calculators. Everybody else was getting their phone taken, but he was getting his calculators taken, and he would just produce another one. So he was a really unique kid, and he really had trouble socializing. And when I look back, I just think if he would have had access to guns, it could have been terrible. And he told me once, he said to me, "I wouldn't kill you because you don't pander." And I said, "What do you mean?" And he said, "Well, I don't like people who feel sorry for me. I don't like people that try to be nice to me because they're being fake. It's the first person that I'm going to kill is my mother, and then I'm going to go from there." And so when you say, like Precious says, maybe it's not mental health, then I'm like, I don't know what mental health means anymore, because it's such a buzzword in our society today. But here was a person that didn't believe anybody liked him, didn't have any capacity to accept love, and he wanted to kill his own mother. And the people who were around him kind of tolerated him, but he didn't like being tolerated, because you can't bully there. So nobody was going to do anything to get themselves in trouble, but nobody was going to embrace him either. And that person is today, in this and all 32 years of my life, the only person that I had ever known that I actually believe would have been capable of something like this. And at 17, I just thought that kid's a fucking weirdo. And that was my thought.
Oh no.
And that was it.
That's your first F-bomb on C-Talk.
And I just told it. But you know what? The funny thing was, when he would talk to me, I would just tell him, "Chance," oh shit. I would say, "Chance, that's not okay.
Come on.
That's not okay. You can't
keep going off on him. Come on, keep going."
I would just say, "That's not okay, and I don't want to hear this. you're crazy, stop it.
Mm.
I had no sympathy or empathy for him at all.
But he respected you, it sounds like.
But what I'm saying is that I don't know if that's mental health or if that's literally a personality disorder. I don't know if that's the same thing as mental health. But a person who doesn't feel connected. Okay, so a person who doesn't feel connected to anybody else is definitely more capable of killing other people. We know that.
Bobby, you said if he had access to the gun, he would have shot up the school. That's mental health.
I believe that. But then why are you saying that's what I'm saying. Why are you pushing back on people saying that it's mental health if your response is that when people shoot up the school, it's mental health? It can't be both ways.
No, you're right. You got me. I don't know. Let me process it some more.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. You got me on that one. Yeah. Go ahead, Precious.
And that reminds me, when we talk about profiling a school shooter, I believe a counselor for the University of Virginia shooting, there was this, I remember reading it. I was in my cosmetology class and they had a big article about it. And I remember reading, there was his teacher, who was a Black woman, by the way, was warning the administration about that man because he had a lot of illustrations of him killing, creating, drawing guns, having rapes. He was showing a lot in his illustrations. And she was telling them for the longest that you need to do something about this student before he does something. They did not believe her. They did not believe her. They disregarded everything she said. And she said that she retired from that school like less than a week before the shooting happened. Because she knew he was a ticking time bomb.
Mm.
So granted, there is a thin line between to profile somebody, because the question is, are you truly profiling this person based off of symptoms that they're describing, or is it based off your personal bias? So if you're not personally trained to, I don't want to say the word label, profile somebody, then I don't know if this really is our spot to truly profile somebody. But apparently that college instructor did, and apparently she was right. I don't know what kind of teacher she was, or I want to say she was a counselor. Which probably could give her, some sort of legitimacy of her profiling him. But
why do you think that you need to be? And this is a stupid question for me, especially as an attorney, but why do you think that you need to be an expert? Because there was an incident at my niece's school, who's 10, where a little boy tried to push a little girl off of one of those play artifice things, like big toys, right? He tried to push her off. And my niece said, "You're going to apologize for that." That was her comment. She's an Alexander. She said, "You're going to apologize for that, and I don't care what you do to me." So she said that, essentially like, pay up now. And he walks away. Later that day, during that same recess, my niece goes to get a drink of water. The boy follows her because the water fountain is outside the view of the teachers. And when she goes to get the water, he comes up behind her and tries to block her nasal passage.
Oh.
So my sister called me and asked me about this. And she said, "I'm really worried," this is a private school, "that the school is going to be upset with me if I file a police report because this is, a very young person." And I said, "I don't even know if he's really capable of criminal intent yet. But here's what I can tell you. The scary part is not that he blocked her air passage. It's that he had the strategy in mind to wait till she was out of view from anybody else. That's sinister. That's the type of behavior from somebody who's looking to inflict violence on someone and not get caught." But I'm not a psychologist, Precious. But I know that, just like
Right.
you know that. If somebody follows you behind a corner, they're trying not to get caught. They fully intend to do what it is that they crossed the corner for. So why do you think that you need to be an expert? I think that we should encourage people to be vigilant. And then we have to deal with the cultural consequences, though, of pointing these people out. Because if you're wrong, right, you're the worst person ever.
Right. The reason why I say that is because I'm speaking from terms of Black and brown community. We already get labeled based off of certain symptoms as it is when it comes to mental illness, whether it's ADHD or ADHD, which may or may not even be the case if they don't know what they're saying. That's not to say it cannot be reported or it should not be brought up. It's just that if we label somebody, because we already have an issue right now labeling kids now of certain intelligent disability as it is, and that may not even be the case if the teacher themselves, or I'm talking about in terms of professional aspect or whoever's in authority. That's what I'm really speaking on. So if you're not that skilled in it, could you easily might misdiagnose somebody? Someone blocked somebody's air pass, obviously this motherfucker got a habit of trying to do some harm. Okay, so obviously it doesn't take a genius to figure that out. But if you're going to put this on, are we going to put this on a profile or on a record for them to follow along through their school like we do intelligence disabilities? How we go about that? That's where I'm going from. I'm not saying don't report nobody, or you'll see certain signs of a child doing something that could be very problematic down the line. Just like if you see kids doing harm to animals, you may want to do something right now. Don't wait till they get older. Get it now. So that's what I'm saying. Who are making these judgment calls?
Right. I'm with
That's
you.
what I'm getting at.
I have no problem with profiling a school shooter because, like, the question here, we profile kids as gang members, unfortunately, all the time. I mean, whole dress codes were created specifically in schools just for gang members. So I think the thing is, unfortunately, data shows us that school shooters usually are not kids of color. So that's why maybe they aren't profiled as often. But I don't necessarily have a problem with profiling a school shooter because gang members are profiled all the time.
I'll profile it real quick if I had it in my hands.
Time out. So what we saying is it's cool to profile now.
But this is where I say the biasness comes in at, because we just said they don't. The most mass shooters do not look like us on this panel. So if the biasness, if you go to a school and they're supposed to do the or we're expecting teachers or whoever do the profiling, are they really doing it from an expertise standpoint, or are they doing it from their own personal bias?
Here's the deal. This is how I see it as a person who's in these hallways all the time. You know what I mean? I think profiling is cool if it's the first line of defense. And then we have a conversation, and then that's a different stage of the profiling. And then we bring in parents, and then we have a conversation, and then we move from there. Like, it just can't stop with, okay, let me make it real simple for you. Let me make it real simple for you. Which one should I choose? Knife or the condom? Knife or the condom? Okay, because I find a knife on you, that doesn't mean that you want to hurt someone. It could mean that you're scared of being hurt. Just because I find a condom on you doesn't mean you're having sex. I think in both those instances, you have the opportunity to make the right or wrong profile if you don't have a conversation.
I think for a school shooter, it's more of an intervention because some of the signs, like if you have a high school kid who's a complete loner, has absolutely no friends, that's like an intervention because that's probably not good for his development or her, development in terms of, collaborating or working with other people. So that's an intervention. They're also having problems at home. So you're intervening to help, not as much like profiling them. Of course, that's a tertiary aspect of being a school shooter, but these are people that need some kind of intervention because they're not developing.
No, I just think we need to unpack that. That's it.
I think we also need to keep in mind in most education premises, you're not allowed to have a gun, have a knife on you anyway. So I think it's a different tale if you go into a school or on premises and you bring in a weapon or a knife, for instance, and you know you're not supposed to have it unless you're against law enforcement or whatnot. Other than that, or faculty. Other than that, you bringing a knife on the premises already sets off the alarm, because I know I work for the federal people. I call it federal people. If you walk in there, even if it's a plastic knife, they are telling you you got to leave and leave now. And they will watch you leave the building. They are very strict when it comes to any type of weapon. Granted, I'm talking about federal building compared to a school, but the point is, the those type of objects, even if it looks like it, it's not allowed at all. So so if you do have a child coming to the school and got a knife on them, most people's reaction in the schoolhouse could say, you need to go to the office or whatever, or they're going to escort you somewhere. Then they call up whoever. But I don't know. Maybe
I've got one on that one. So kids bring a lot of things to school that you would not expect them to. I was once substitute administrator or substitute principal at Everett High School. Everett is located like either across the street or right next door to the police station. And when I was there, that's when they decided to do their random search of lockers. So they had the dogs and they just randomly searched. I know it was, and I only was there like a week because this was the first time I was at a high school that had essentially police force. Even when kids would change classes during the hall, they'd have the dogs with them. And they went and they randomly searched lockers. They found knives, and this is not in the hood or whatever, knives, guns. So kids bring things in that you wouldn't expect. And of course, the reason was usually, well, I was scared. I wanted to be protected. This is for after school, not at school. So kids bring a lot of things.
Oh, they do. I'm not saying it doesn't happen.
And a lot more bring knives and guns than you think. Because that was just a random search. They didn't search every locker. They just picked lockers to search.
Oh yeah, I've seen it happen before several times. Oh yeah, there wasn't no weapon; it was drugs. But hey,
I quite often find young women who have mace on them, and I know that mace can be used to fight off an assailant. That's trying to assault you. Like if it's a young woman who feels like they've been, harassed or they're being stalked by someone. But I also know that mace can be used, in conjunction with a fight. And it can be a very helpful weapon if you want to subdue someone you don't like, who's never done anything to you other than just be your opposition. And you can, but I don't make the assumption. I don't. I ask questions. Why do you have this? And if they say it's for my defense against who? And it's a series of questions. And that's the same thing I do with a knife. Probably not going to do it with a gun. I'm gonna keep it real with you. I'm not going to do it with a gun.
Isn't that an automatic in Washington?
Yeah, it's automatic.
It's automatic, so there's nothing you can do.
Yeah. But I don't think a lot of people understand the complexities of being an administrator and being in that school, where legally we are the parents of those children when their parents aren't there. It's actually under the law.
And locus parentis.
Exactly. And so it's like you get a person in the room, I said, I just now seen you, do something, to this other person. And it was mean. It was disrespectful. It was aggressive. They were the target. You were the aggressor. And then they say, no, I was retaliating. They've been bullying me for months. So it's like each person is calling the other person a bully. And so like when you're sitting there listening to, to students and parents protests, it's like both sides, both families are saying the same thing. My child's bullied. My child's bullied. And then you get some people to say, we don't even want to sit and talk about this. Well, if you don't want to sit and talk about it, let's do a safety transfer. Why'd you safety transfer the person who was getting bullied? Well, because they were saying that the other person was bullying them, and the other person was saying they were bullying. So it's like you're stuck in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, what's the plan of action? You know what I mean? Where you don't always know what the source is, who got bullied first. Maybe sometimes you can just see a cycle. And I'll go first with the plan of action. And I'm just gonna keep it a kilo with you because I have an interesting perspective. It's because I was the principal to all three of our children. All three of our children went to the same school that I was a principal at. And I saw them get bullied by other kids because their dad was the principal. They couldn't get to me, so they would mess with my kids. You know what I mean? But I think first and foremost, I'm going to say this, and I might get in a little bit of trouble, but that's fine. First and foremost, you show your children love, and you show them the difference between love and fear, and you show them the difference between being empathetic, being retaliatory, and self-defense. You show them the difference between defending yourself and being an aggressor. That's the first thing you do. Like, you show them love first, and then you tell them let them hands go. You teach them to give a person a warning, and if they don't heed to the warning, let them go, and then we'll deal with the consequences. That's worked for me. It's worked for me. And the reason why it's worked for me because I grew up as an only child for 17 years, and I gave them, my brochure. That's what worked for me. That's how I survived bullying. And I did some bullying in my lifetime too. And as a bully, I knew that I went for soft targets. As soon as someone started fighting back, like, that's not the guy. That's not the guy. I probably should just stop doing this. This is not the career for me. Like, I did it at O'Day, man. We used to mess with this dude named Jim, man. Native American brother with a whole bunch of acne, and we used to go in, but Jim used to fight back all the time, man. It was like, he's probably not the guy we want to mess with. So I've been on both ends. I've been bullied. I've been, from victim, to victimizer in real quick.
Mm-hmm.
So show your children love. Let them know what it means to defend yourself. Let them know what it means to be an aggressor. And at some point, you have to teach your children to be like your body's immune system, to defend yourself. Your immune system doesn't go outside of your body to defend yourself. That's like a viral attack. That's not your immune system. That's something different. So you have to teach your children to act like your immune system, to be self-sustaining, to be loving, but at the same time, be willing to defend yourself. What y'all think? What's the plan of action?
Nobody don't got one. I guess I'll go then. Well, I guess I'm gonna keep it real as I always do. Well, I'm gonna say what I had just said. I just said it yesterday. This country don't give a damn about these kids, and I don't know how many times I gotta keep saying it. No one gives a damn about these kids. They don't give a damn about your kids. But I will say this, parents, you need to check on your kids and do it quite consistently. But those type of personalities, I feel those are things that I don't believe they wake up one day and say, I'm gonna do this. I think it's a chain that goes on and on and on. And one thing that I've noticed about some parents, even in my own family, we tend to develop our own bias against our children, saying, nah, they wouldn't have done this. Why wouldn't they? They are humans after all. And if you see problematic behaviors, you may want to go ahead and jump on that ASAP. And it's so funny because I remember this 2020 interview with Diane Sawyer with one of the mothers from Columbine. And I remember Diane Sawyer asked her how was he able to pull this off underneath your own roof? And you know, she's still under motive. Because I can only imagine being a parent of something. Shut up, thing. It's one of those things. I can only imagine being a parent of a child who did something like that. That's a hard thing to live up on. And she's still kind of hanging in there. But I was reading a comment and people like, "Oh, Diane Sawyer is being harder." I said, "No, the fuck she isn't. She asking a legitimate question." That's a legitimate question. Like, I thought the same thing. Cause like, that's insane to pull that off. She said she didn't check his room. She already gave him his privacy. She didn't question the things that he did or where he went. I said, that's right there is where you messed up at. I'm not blaming her for everything, but she did miss a lot of things that she said. Like, I'm hearing red flags throughout this whole interview. And please understand, I was 21 when I saw that interview. I said, I already saw the red flag. I don't even have kids. Nor, I don't think I've ever been in space of someone who will do something like this. That's my memory. So, again, parents, I think if people say, I want to hug and love my kids, yeah, do that, but also be honest with yourself when it comes to your kids. Be honest with yourself. So, and that's all I got.
She said, that's all I got.
That's all I got. I can say so much, but I'm gonna say that for the next one. I'm gonna go off on that one.
Oh boy. I mean, on one hand, I think parents should be more mindful of treasuring the time that they have with their kid when they're bringing their child to school. Always, it could be the last time. Think about how you can contribute to the security of the school that you bring your children to. I hope I'm still an advocate for community policing because I hope that people advocate for that. But also, if you are struggling with your children, to call on as many resources as often as possible to receive help for them. From what I understand, also this shooter, his mother was a single mother. They had this argument and then going over to the grandparents. And in some cases, grandparents, if you find that your grandchild, if you are having challenges with them, make sure that you try and, receive help, pull the bell as often as necessary. I think it's better to err on the side of looking like you're a hoover parent or whatever versus, this outcome. I really think people should become aware of a decision that's going to be coming down from the Supreme Court very soon, which will probably highlight this issue again.
Yeah. What you think, Bobby?
I guess I'll just start with like the most practical thing, which is really messed up. But I can imagine buying a trauma plate, which is just a piece of metal, putting it in my kid's backpack and saying, if you ever feel like this is happening at school, put your backpack on and make sure that it's facing the correct orientation because there's a trauma plate there. And that might be like $100, $150 for a piece of metal, piece of iron. It might even be cheaper than that. You might even be able to take an old MacBook that's made out of thin metal and place that in front and put the backpack on. And now, this is fucked up, but it makes them shoot you in the head. That's where we're at. If we're not going to address the firearms issue, and I don't think we're going to, we're not going to address the firearms issue. We're just not. We're not going to do that as a country. So then I have to start thinking about what are the most practical things that you can do in the classroom. So like I was saying, a trauma plate for each student, so that they have that on their desk regardless of what classroom they're in, so that it's not an equity issue, so that not only the rich kids can afford a Tron plate. So when the student is going through the school, then they can pull out the plate from their desk and they can hold it. That's such a sad thing to have to think about, but that's one solution or one ameliorating factor. And then I think I go to the less practical thing, which is that have a relationship with your child, assuming your child's not the one who would carry something out like this, where
one too.
where you can ask your kid about their classmates and encourage your child to get to know all of their classmates, and have a relationship where you show discretion in what you act on, so that your child trusts you enough to tell you about things that are happening in the classroom with their peers. Because if you have a kid that's not going to talk to you about this, then as a parent, you don't have any way of knowing. And the thing about it is that the students in these scenarios can always come back and talk, the ones that survive. And the interviews are always like, this kid was always X, Y, and Z, and we knew that they were capable of it. But they never shared that. They never shared that. And so I come back to that open line of communication, and I'll leave you with this. When I was in 6th grade, we had a kid bring a BB gun to school, and it looked like a real gun, and it fell out of his pocket during class. And I'll say about 50% of the students were scared to say anything because they didn't want to get shot by him. And then the other 50% were concerned about how they would look to their peers for snitching. And that's something that we have to deal with culturally that nobody will want to talk about. But how valuable is it to teach your kids snitches get stitches? But guess what? Bullets are not better than stitches. So let's have transparency about what's happening in our classrooms between our parents and our students.
Yeah, that's a powerful moment right there, because people need to understand that citizens don't really snitch, and neither do educators, because citizens aren't gangsters. They're not, they're citizens, and educators aren't gang members. So technically, educators can't snitch because we're mandatory reporters. See, there's rules to this stuff. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah.
I'm also glad that you brought up that when people say that, oh, it was no surprise that this kid shut up to school because we always could see it. You feel me? I can say that I've known a lot of murderers. I've known a lot of murderers in my 24 years. I've known a lot of murderers since I've been at the high school level at Lincoln High School. I've known murderers at people who've murdered people at Garfield. And I can say, yeah, it doesn't surprise me. But at the same time, there's a thing called FERPA, and there's a thing called like privacy laws that say you can't really be talking about a student like that. So it doesn't surprise me, but it makes me wonder if like they're already on your radar, but how do you break that privacy clause to prevent that person from really doing something? But it's never happened at school though. It's always happened off campus. Like literally students who I've, assigned, detention. And then they're like, oh yeah, I'll be there. And then over the weekend, they never make it to Monday because they didn't murder somebody. But I think it speaks a lot to the argument that they didn't do it at school though. But I will say we also had SROs there. We had, school resource officers. So I don't know. They were armed. I don't know if that has something to do with it or not. I would like to think that it has something to do with our culture. But I will say there is a dynamic of the post-pandemic that we have had a significant rise in violence this year without school resource officers in the school. And I told you a story off record before the show, but it didn't happen on campus though. And I got other stories too. So I'm just saying it's just not just one dimensional. It's not a slam dunk. It's not just like, oh, we can just use the macro data for the nation to say that school resource officers shouldn't be in schools, and that should replace all the data for individual schools who actually need them. Start taking certain resources away from schools who have, you know what I'm saying, a lot of violence in their schools. And in the form of like response time for law enforcement. Because as much as stuff that they talk stuff about law enforcement, they will complain in those areas where there's a lot of violence, the response time. If the response time, you know what I'm saying, is not good, it doesn't matter how many, do your job. I pay my taxes. Why did it take you 15 minutes to get here when we told you violence is happening on our campus? That's because our people are conditioned to go through the legal, you know what I'm saying, avenues, and they don't have any alternative routes to really handle. Like I said, I have a walkie-talkie, I have a contact list, and I have some paperwork right now. That's what I live by. When people threaten me, when we got kids being bullied by other kids, when we got fights, I have a walkie-talkie, I have a contact list, and I have paperwork. I would love for people to come shadow me and come work with me for just even a day and just see what I have to go through and see if they could make it a whole school year with those resources. I have counselors too. And I actually think that we're doing a really, really exemplary job at Lincoln High School. I don't care what people think. We've come a long way. Because you know what? A lot of people are going through a lot of this stuff after the post-pandemic. It's been bad. Our children have not been in school for a year and a half. They have developed and maintained some really bad habits. And a lot of it is, let's resolve every single conflict with violence and let's record it and let's upload it on social media and laugh at it and, you know what I'm saying, try to see how many views we can get. That's the culture. But what can I say? I'm one of the many people that, you know, pay pay-per-view for, you know, fights. So I'm a part of that culture too. Only the difference is it's regulated by referees and is sanctioned by, you know, different, you know, fighting associations and stuff like that. But I'm attracted to the same thing. But we just got to show kids like what's the appropriate way to express violence. And some people say there isn't a way. But that's another deeper discussion. Unfortunately, we live in a country, Trisha brought it up, like you used to live in the Netherlands, like that's just our country. That's our country. That's our culture of our country. We're extremely ultra violent. And it makes money. So anyway, C Talk. I don't know what else to say. Another good one. Trisha and Precious, y'all gotta do it after C Talk because I'm gonna be tuning in while I'm eating dinner. I need to hear this.
Okay. I'm ready.
I love y'all. Be safe. Peace.
Peace.